We're continuing the Sefer Mareh Yaakov after a small hiatus, and as with each week, we're going to introduce something from the Parshat that we just read. So we just read Parshat Shlach Lecha, and we want to look at two psukim that have the same word appearing multiple times with different notes, and see if we can divine what the different notes are truly telling us. So we're in Bamidbar Yud Gimel, Pasuk Kaf Gimel and Kaf Dalet. It says Vayavo ad Nachal Eshkol. They came to a place called Nachal Eshkol, the river of Eshkol. Vayichritu Misham Zmora. They cut from there a vine, the Eshkol Anavim Echad, and a single cluster of grapes. Vayiseu B'mot B'shnayim. So again, we've got the word Eshkol twice, and we'll come to the third and fourth time. And they carried it between two people. And they took from the rimonim and the teinim, they took some of the other fruit. Lamakomahu, the next pasuk, to that place, Kara Nachal Eshkol. They called Nachal Eshkol. They called it the river of Eshkol. Alodot HaEshkol, because of the story of this cluster, Asher Kartu Mishal B'nai Israel, that B'nai Israel had cut from there. So the Mefarshim have a little bit of a problem with this. Our second pasuk says that they called the place Nachal Eshkol, but our first pasuk says they came to Nachal Eshkol. So how did they name it and then already have come to it? So even Ezra gives the simplistic answer. The simplistic answer is, well, that's the name the place was going to get, and they just call it that in order, for convenience sake. The Chur L'Zahav gives a little bit of a more involved answer. It seems that when we see the word Eshkol the first time, it's written chaser. It's written without a vav in between the kaf and the lamed. And all the other times that we see the word Eshkol, it's written full. It's written with the vav after the lamed. The only other place in Tanakh where we see Eshkol written chaser like this, written missing that vav, is when we talk about Abraham, who had three partners who helped him in recapturing his nephew Lot from the war that had taken him captive. It says he had three partners who he recruited to help him, Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre. And Eshkol's name is always written chaser. It's written without that vav after his name. So the Chur L'Zahav reads the story this way: Vayavo ad Nachal Eshkol. They came to the river named after Abraham's partner Eshkol. Vayichritu Misham Zmora the Eshkol Anavim Echad, and they cut from there an Eshkol, literally what the word means, a bunch of grapes. Lamakomahu Kara Nachal Eshkol. To that place they called the valley of the cluster of grapes. Alodot HaEshkol Asher Kartu Misham B'nai Israel, because of the cluster of grapes. So they actually renamed the place, even though it has the exact sound to the name. They've given it a name of their own. They've made the place their own. So the Chur L'Zahav says, used to be after Avram's partner, now it's after the thing of grapes. They've taken the place, they've made their own mark, even if they call it the same thing. Now, let's look at the notes. Vayavo ad Nachal Eshkol. The first time when it's Eshkol's name, it's with a revi'i. This is a note that makes it stand by itself. This emphasizes the word and lets it sit there by itself. So they came to the place named after Eshkol. We're emphasizing that it's named after Avram's partner, and we're stopping there. Vayichritu Misham Zmora, the Eshkol with a ma'apach the second time, and a bunch of grapes. This is going to tell us. This is the story. It's going to lead from here, and it's going to focus us in on what's going to happen with this thing. So we've got a ma'apach there. Lamakomahu Kara Nachal Eshkol. To that place they called Nachal Eshkol with the vav in it. They called it the river of the cluster of grapes, and that is where we've taken this name. We're going to rest on it, and we're going to perhaps elevate it. Al Odot HaEshkol, because of the story of the Eshkol, with a katon, with a double meaning. Eshkol means both Eshkol's name and the cluster of grapes. So our variety of notes on the word eshkol and the difference between having it written chaser, missing the vav, and maleh, with the vav filled in, tells us the story that the Chur Zahav tells us in even more detail. The Chur Zahav doesn't quote the notes at all. This is just our take on using this method of analysis to fill in the story that, in fact, the Chur Zahav derived for another reason. So,
that's great.
We're going to continue from the text. We are in the Parshat of Noach. We are on page 44 in the section of Noach, Genesis 8, chapter 8, verse 1. Everybody found me?
Yeah, I think we went on, because I got my notes.
You got notes for that one? Okay.
Yeah,
How far did we get?
So up to, I think, page 46 is, I think, where we left.
Right.
Or, yeah, either 46 or the bottom of 45. I think the bottom of 45.
Come on.
Very bottom of 45. 8-2.
Yeah, correct. We did do the one more sentence. So we're on the bottom of page 45, Perek Chet, Pasuk Beit, chapter 8, verse 2. Vayisakru, and they were shut, with a pashta. The pashta is a minor emphasis of the word and leading forward into what is going to go beyond it. Number 1. After the foreseen level of the flood was achieved, all major sources which supplied the water gradually ceased operating, and they were shut, as indicated by the directional shape of the reading mark. So this is going to lead us forward into what is going to go there. So the situation from before has ceased, and we've emphasized that we're entering a new phase. We're entering the phase where there is no more water coming in, and we're looking forward to mayanot, fountains of, with a munach, with a part of a zakef katon. The munach separates itself out from what's come before and then leads forward into something that's new. Many of the fountains of the ground were obliterated, but some of them still remained active for the purpose of specific functions, as denoted by the shape of the reading mark. So he's saying that things were shut, but mayanot, some of the fountains were closed, and some of them continued on. Sorry, he's referencing Rashi here, so I'm going to read the Rashi for everyone. Should have had this prepared, I'm sorry. 8:2. State. Mayanot. Kisheniftechu tiv kol mayanot. When they were opened, it said all of the fountains, and now vayisakru, and when they were closed, it just says mayanot, the fountains, i.e. some of them, not all of them, as was referenced before. V'kan ein ktiv kol, and here it didn't write the word all. Lefisha nishtayru mehem, because some of them remained. Otan sheyesh bahem tzorach leolam, those that have, that the world has a need for them. Kegon chamei Tveria, for example, the hot springs in Tveria, the chayotze bahem, and other things like that. And he quotes that from Breshit Rabbah and from Gemara Sanhedrin. So the lack of the word kol, the lack of the word all, which we used before when we said all of them opened up, and now it just says closed some of closed the fountains, not referencing the word all, tells us that, again, from the note. We're separating out. They were all open. Now only some of them are remaining open. So there's a new sequence that comes afterwards, and that means that some of them are still remaining open, despite the fact that our sentence tells us that they were closed. So again, we get some depth that's not there in the text. Tehom, that has a katon on it, so that's 2 dots in the text. Beside number 3, it looks a little bit like 1 dot, but it is in fact like a colon on top of the hay there. Tehom with a katon. Katon, we'll remember, has those 2 dots, and therefore it's going to tell us a double meaning or something that has more than one thing relevant to it in the word. Depth, number 3. All productive, powerful springs deriving from great depth became closed and ceased to function, as pointed out by the bipartite shape of the reading mark. So what is double about this? He goes on with a further note.
That some stayed open, some were closed. In other words, they split in function. Before they were all, and now it's only some, perhaps.
But I thought in number 2 we said not all.
But that's the point. I think in terms of the ones that were depth, right?
Maybe it's showing us the 2 dots on top of one another. The upper dot is the normal level and the lower dot is the deep level.
So despite the fact that we're saying some of them are staying open, what we're saying is the ones that were at great depth, all of them became closed. So he's saying all productive, powerful springs deriving from great depth became closed. And not only did they become closed, but they ceased to function. So the question of the doubleness here, because it has to focus on the word depth, means that while we're saying Mayanot means some of them remained open, all the ones at great depth remained closed, and not only did they remain closed, but they ceased to function. So that's the doubleness that's here, that they not only remain closed, but they cease to function. Mayanot Tehom, extra note, fountains of depth. In comparison to the state of the original mobilization, when the water is first coming out, when it was said Rabbah kol Mayanot Tehom, all the fountains of great depth. At the closing, some of the hot mineral springs will have to continue their service, as mentioned before. So what is he adding here? Bear with me. I'm presuming he's quoting from Breshit Rabbah, because that's not Genesis 1:11 that he's quoting from. So I will look that up in Breshit Rabbah, and I will get back to us for the next shiur. Va'arubot, and windows with a tipcha. Tipcha gathers things that have come before, and and windows. The substantial water production by the fountains of below was closed, and windows from above ceased to deliver great amounts of water employed to constitute the flood, as referred backwards by the directional shape of the reading mark. So again, the places that the water is falling from above, those are closing as well, so that's why we have to look backwards to what's come before. The concept of closing is folding into these upper sources of water as well. Hashamayim, of the heavens, with an etnachta, with the stabilizing note in the center of the sentence. The might, bura, of the heavens, by the attitude of judgment, din, like by Guru Hamayim, the Hamayim Gavru. So we're mentioning was again changed to the quality of kindness and mercy by Yizkor and Chesed, assuming its standard position as stressed by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark. Go ahead.
Is he saying now that the Shamayim is returning to its normal function of providing pains b'chesed, as a kindness, as opposed to by the closing of the windows?
No, he's saying He's saying that it's maintaining a new attitude which constitutes a stabilizing force in the world. That's before the water was there as part of the judgment, the heavens were there as part of the judgment, and now it's come to Midat Rachamim, it's come to Vayizkor and Chesed and so on, to the point where it can be sustained. And that ability to sustain from above is what allows the world to have stability and allows the flood to end. Vayikale with a mercha, and it ended. So this is a note that's going to look forward into the next idea, slightly connected to what's before, but more importantly looking forward. The hot water from the deep springs, instead of causing destruction, had changed to bring blessing and comfort to the ark, and it ended the surrounding chill of its environment at a considerable elevation, as shown by the directional shape of the reading mark. So surrounding chill of its environment. So at this point, the ark is still very high above the surface of what was the land before, and as you get higher, the temperature gets colder, and yet the warm water that had come from before was allowing yet again another sense of stability and mercy to be in the fact that hot water, which had been a destructive force before, is now in fact a calming and merciful and blessed source from at this stage of the game. Hageshem, the rain, with a tipcha. This is something that looks backwards and closes off the thought from the previous word. Although the rain had ceased to fortify the volume of the flood, water was still substantial, as expressed by the closing shape of the directional reading mark. Even though there is no more rain coming down, there is still an awful lot of water. So the looking backwards at what had happened, there's still cumulatively a surrounding deluge, a surrounding amount of water from the flood that had come before. And yet the stopping of the rain, Vayikale Hageshem, is something that allows for, again, the concept of stability and mercy to re-enter the world.
Yeah, could we go back one? How do you get so much out of, like, and it ended? So, to get the fact that, the waters are hot and the surrounding, because it's elevated.
So, again, it's a mercha, so it's got to take a little bit of what's come from before it, and it's going to lead into what's going to come after it. So that's the first thing. You have to take it in the context that this is something that's drawing what was there before. So we had already talked in the first half of the sentence about the fact that the water is now acting as something merciful, and the warm water from before is still a feature that's there, and because you're getting an ending that draws in all of those ideas from before, the water is now functioning in a merciful way. And how can hot water function in a merciful way? When you're at elevation and you actually need the heat.
You need the heat, okay.
So the note tying into the first half of the pasuk, as opposed to a munach or another note that would stand on its own or something that would separate from things that were before, tells you that concept is available to be drawn on. Number 8, the end of the pasuk, min hashamayim, from the skies, with a sof pasuk. So this is the stabilizing type of note. The clear heaven and the sunshine from the skies brought forth a new beginning and a return of a new life. So we've mentioned it several times before. after a tipcha there is a minor pause. So we have, with the Sof Pasuk, a whole new idea, a whole new concept coming in, and he's introducing the idea of clear skies and sunshine as this, yet again, whole new thing that's going to add even further stability. And that wouldn't be something that you could derive without knowing that after Tipcha there's a minor pause, and with understanding the stability of Sof Pasuk. And we will read the sentence, as is our custom now. Vayisakru mayinot tehom va'arubot hashamayim vayikale hageshem min hashamayim. We're continuing with Genesis 8, Pasuk Gimel, the third Pasuk. Vayashuvu, with a dargah. Dargah, as we'll remember, is a note that emphasizes the word, leads forward into what goes after it, and perhaps tells us that there are levels to what is going on. And they receded as a result of the halt in supplies of water from above and below, and due to the potent wind, the waters continued to lower their level, and they receded, as indicated by the shape of the reading mark. So here I think we truly are taking the concept of levels, which is implied in the dargah, and I'm not sure where he introduces the concept of wind here. So whenever we have the concept of mayim, we have the concept of ruach elokim merachefet al pnei hamayim, that the Spirit of God blows over the surface of the water. But I'm not sure that we have any other introduction of the concept of wind into the story here. And
was there wind at the beginning when the wind was sort of whipping up it was sweeping across the land and whipping up the water?
But again, that's in the Breshit story. That's not in the story of the flood anywhere.
But at the beginning of the flood, there wasn't a wind.
We do have one there.
No, the only the kol asher nishmat ruach hayim, everything that but there's no mention of wind. Okay, I'm sorry, there is. Vayaver Elokim ruach al haaretz vayashakol mayim. So my mistake. I knew it was there, and I was struggling to find it. So chet pasuk beit. Why are we? That's obviously wrong. Chet pasuk aleph. That's why. So the two sentences before, and God above, and he traversed God above a wind over the land. Let's just go back for a second to that. Number 13, two psukim before. Therefore the command of the wind was to keep the position of the ark, and it was to remain over the land, as signified by the bar-partite shape. So two psukim before, we did mention the wind. My error, I apologize. And still, so a dargah does not separate itself out from what's come before, but it doesn't necessarily sweep any stuff in. So again, I'm struggling with how he introduces the concept of wind here, other than the fact that it's part of the narrative, I don't see a direct tie, but we'll leave it stand. Vayashuvu hamayim, the waters, with a tivir. Tivir is a note which has that dot stabilized by the mercha around it. However, in spite of these factors, the waters were still voluminous because of the massive accumulation, as denoted by the shape of the reading mark. So even though the water is decreasing, there is still a lot of water surrounding the water that is decreasing. So we have water within water within water. We have the idea of the amount of water that's remaining is still a lot with the other water that's around it, and that's how we get that stabilizing center of the tivir. Me'al, with a mercha, from over. So this is going to slightly include the stuff that's before, but more importantly look forward to what's going to come after it. Number 3, the maintenance of that condition was affected by the production of water entering from over the earth and deriving from some open sources beneath, as stressed by the shape of the directional reading mark. So this is going to look forward. We've already had the concept of some of the sources of water from below maintaining open, and in fact that being something that was good in that it was providing heat in colder climates. But what does he get from over the earth? Directly from the sentence, because it's leading into haaretz. So with the mercha, you have to lead into what's going to come after it. So that's what we get from over the earth, and deriving from open sources beneath. We already said mercha slightly looks backwards to what was come before, and that's certainly the concept that we had introduced in the previous pasuk. Number 4, haaretz with the tipcha. The tipcha is going to close the thought that the mercha had given us, or at least collect stuff from before it, with a slight pause after it. The earth, although the water level was steadily decreasing, the earth itself was undergoing some changes, particularly in the uppermost layer, as shown by the closing shape of the directional reading mark. So what is going me'al, what is going above, and the water is continuing to decrease. But the aretz, the earth, is going to have a small pause again after a tipcha. It's going to be something that is changing and is somewhat different after this event takes place. And that's the tipcha, is sweeping the stuff from before and then pausing to say that there is a change afterwards. Haloch, going, with a munach. Munach completely separates itself out from what's gone before and looks forward into the new concept that goes afterwards. The plateau of the flood was going visibly downwards, as suggested by the shape of the reading mark. So the top level of the water is now separated out from the way that it was before, something that was continually rising, to something that is continually diminishing, and it's looking forward to what is going to happen as the waters continue to recede. Vashov, and retreating, with an etnachta, with the stabilizing note in the middle of the sentence that might have something to look upwards or to be more elevated about it. Vashov, the contributing factors dislodged the flood and propelled its waters. They were diminishing and retreating from their positions, as expressed by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark. So because of all the things that we had mentioned, that there is wind and that the sources of water have closed down, the retreating concept now becomes a a factor that is for the good, for stability, and therefore the lessening of the water is something that can lead to further stability, further improvement of the situation, if you will. Vayachsaru, with this part of a Zakef Katon, that's a munach, and they lessened. So again, this is going to separate itself out from what has gone before and lead forward into yet again something more. Number 7, the most important cause that the level of floodwaters was going down was due to the halt in supply of the water by the rain and by the closing of the underground fountains, and they lessened their extent while natural drainage proceeded at its regular pace, as confirmed by the shape of the reading mark. So you've stopped the sources of the rain, and the source